One is, in fact, petition number 2028 to extend the concessionary bus travel scheme to include people seeking asylum in Scotland. This has been lodged by Pinar Aksu on behalf of Maryhill Integration Network and Doa Abumar on behalf of the Voices Network. And the petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to extend the concessionary travel scheme to include all people seeking asylum in Scotland regardless of age. And we're joined again, as we have been in the past, by our colleague Paul Sweeney, who continues to take a keen interest in this issue. So good morning to you, Mr. Sweeney. We last considered this 15th of May when we agreed to write to Transport Scotland. In June 24, we received a response from Transport Scotland indicating that work was ongoing to establish the most appropriate way to deliver free bus travel for people seeking asylum in Scotland. At that stage, Transport Scotland also told us that they were using the £2 million budget allocation to develop a national pilot scheme to provide free bus travel for those people seeking asylum who were not already covered by existing concessionary travel schemes. It was also noted that this funding was allocated for a single year only. Members will likely be aware that since the Transport Scotland response was received, plans to extend free bus travel to people seeking asylum, which we first secured in a previous conveners group meeting with the First Minister at that time, Humza Yousaf, who agreed to look at this and then subsequently agreed. But members will recall that those plans were then initially scrapped as part of the Scottish Government's plans to cut public spending. However, they have since been revived, with funding for the scheme included in the 25-26 budget, which was recently approved by Parliament. We've also received a submission from the petitioners which calls on the committee to seek further information from Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government on next steps and a timeframe for taking forward the commitment to provide free bus travel for people seeking asylum in Scotland. Now, I have to say, I think the committee is kind of minded, given that the aims of the petition have been in themselves secured, to consider whether there's more that we can do. But before we have that discussion, can I invite Paul Sweeney to offer his thoughts to us?
Well, thank you, Convener, and it's a pleasure to join you this morning. I'd like to echo your comments on the work done by Pinar Aksu of Maryhill Integration Network and Doa Abumar of the Red Cross Voices Network, who really drove the public campaign in relation to extending free concessionary bus travel to people seeking asylum in Scotland, given the otherwise fairly onerous conditions they are living under in terms of no recourse to public funds, etc. I'm pleased that your own efforts in the Conveners Committee did press the First Minister to consider the adoption of the policy, and indeed that was successful, though of course, as you mentioned, it did have a mishap when the government did then decline to carry it forward. Welcome news that in the most recent budget the government has included that in its programme. I believe the initial allocation in the budget for 24-25 was £2 million. It remains to be seen the detail of how this latest iteration will be rolled out, and I think that's where the concern of the petitioners continue to lie, that they've already had that stop-start approach in the past from the government, and there's also concern that it will not be on the same statutory footing as the other concessionary travel schemes in Scotland, including the over-60s scheme and the under-22 scheme. And I think there is a desire to ensure that it's done via a statutory instrument and not some tokenistic measure that could simply expire after a year or so. They want a degree of permanence in the process. So I think until that comfort is provided by the government, I would appeal to the committee members to keep the petition open until the government is prepared to furnish this committee with the detail of how the scheme will operate. We've only ever really had a high-level commitment in the budget, but never progressed that into how it will be operationalised. Obviously, there is a real social need and continuing social need for it. There was an expression by government ministers previously that it could be interdicted by adjustments to the no recourse to public funds rule by the Home Secretary. And I think the nature of the change in government since the election means that that risk is less obvious. So I think there is a great opportunity to press ahead with the statutory instrument to introduce this on a sure footing. And until we get that commitment from the government, I think this petition merits remaining open.
Colleagues, we therefore have to consider whether we think there is more that the committee could have oversight of, more of which the committee could have oversight. I can hear my wife committing my grammar as I speak, or whether in fact the committee has taken matters as far as we can. Do we have any suggestions for action? Mr. Chowdhury?
I think in light of what Mr. Sweeney has said, I think we should write to the Scottish Government seeking further information on the working group with the third sector representatives and other interested parties, especially whether consideration is still being given to the development of a national pilot scheme for the delivery of free bus travel for people seeking asylum, and when it expects this working group to offer recommendation on particular delivery of free bus travel on longer term basis.
And I think couple that just with a couple of the points Mr. Sweeney made as well, in terms of real detail in relation to longer term commitment, I think was the point. Well, I was kind of minded to let the petition close, but I think on the appeal of Mr. Sweeney and in light of Mr. Chowdhury's recommendation, are members content for us to continue? We are. Thank you very much.